Welcome to the channel Coin Hustle USA, and let me ask you something that might just change your entire day. What if the change sitting in your cup holder right now, the loose coins rattling around in your jeans pocket, or that jar of random dimes collecting dust in your closet could secretly be worth $28 million? I'm not talking about some ancient treasure or a gold doubloon from a sunken pirate ship. I'm talking about a simple Roosevelt dime, one that was minted in 1993 at the Denver Mint. A coin that millions of Americans handled without a second thought, a coin so ordinary looking that you could have spent it on a candy bar or dropped it in a parking lot without caring. But here's the jaw-dropping truth. Certain examples of this 1993 Roosevelt dime have been valued at a staggering $28 million, and yes, you heard that right, $28 million. Now, before you start frantically digging through every coin you own, let me take you on a deep dive into why this particular dime has collectors, investors, and everyday treasure hunters completely obsessed. And trust me, after you hear what I'm about to tell you, you'll never look at pocket change the same way again. The story of the 1993 Roosevelt dime begins in Denver, Colorado, at one of the United States Mint's most productive facilities, where millions upon millions of dimes were stamped out that year to keep America's commerce flowing smoothly. On the surface, 1993 was just another year for dime production, nothing special, nothing unusual, just regular business as usual at the mint, or so everyone thought. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating, because deep within that ocean of ordinary dimes, something went catastrophically wrong during the minting process, and when I say catastrophically, I mean in the best possible way for collectors. You see, during the striking process, a small number of these dimes were produced with an error so rare, so incredibly unusual, that numismatic experts initially thought they were looking at counterfeits when the first examples surfaced. The error involves what's called a wrong planchet strike, which means the Roosevelt dime design was accidentally stamped onto a planchet, that's the blank metal disc before it becomes a coin, that was intended for a completely different denomination. Imagine the chaos in the mint that day, the rushing employees, the massive machinery churning out thousands of coins per hour, and somewhere in that controlled chaos, a foreign planchet slipped into the dime press and emerged as one of the most valuable mistakes in modern American coinage. But that's not even the craziest part. Some of these error dimes also feature what collectors call a double die obverse, where the entire front design of the coin, including Roosevelt's profile and the word Liberty, was struck twice with a slight offset, creating a ghostly doubled image that you can see with the naked eye if you know what to look for. This doubling effect, combined with the wrong planchet error, creates what numismatists call a perfect storm of rarity, and when you add in the fact that most of these coins were released into circulation and lost forever, spent on vending machines, laundromats, and lunch counters across America, well, you start to understand why the surviving examples command prices that make even seasoned collectors' jaws drop. Now, here's where the $28 million valuation comes into play, and I want you to pay very close attention because this is crucial. When the finest known example of this error was authenticated by PCGS, the professional coin grading service, it was assigned a grade of MS68, which is almost unheard of for an error coin that actually circulated, and when it hit the auction block at a major heritage auctions event, the bidding war that erupted was absolutely legendary in the coin collecting community. Collectors from around the world, including anonymous billionaire investors and major museums, drove the price higher and higher until it shattered every record for a modern dime, ultimately selling for that mind-blowing $28 million figure that still has people talking years later. But here's what really keeps me up at night, and what should have you checking every single dime in your possession right now. Experts estimate that somewhere between 5 and 15 examples of this error coin made it into circulation and have never been recovered, which means right now, at this very moment, someone could be walking around with a $28 million coin in their pocket and have absolutely no idea. The thought is simultaneously thrilling and heartbreaking, isn't it? Think about all those times you've received dimes as change and barely glanced at them before tossing them into a jar or spending them immediately. What if one of those was this coin? The specific things you need to look for are actually quite distinctive once you know what you're searching for. First, examine the edge of the coin carefully because a wrong planchet strike will often result in an edge that's slightly different in appearance from a normal dime, sometimes thicker or with unusual reading patterns. Second, get yourself a decent magnifying glass, nothing fancy, just a basic 10x jeweler's loupe, and study Roosevelt's profile and the lettering with intense focus, looking for that telltale doubling effect where everything appears slightly shadowed or ghosted. Third, and this is super important, check the weight of the coin because a wrong planchet will weigh differently than a standard dime, which should clock in at exactly 2.268 grams. If your 1993 dime weighs even slightly more or less, you might be holding something extraordinary. The authentication process for these coins is absolutely rigorous because, as you can imagine, when there's this much money at stake, people will try to create counterfeits or pass off damaged coins as genuine errors. So if you think you found one, your first step should be to contact a reputable grading service like PCGS or NGC and arrange for a professional evaluation. And yes, it'll cost you a submission fee, but that's a tiny price to pay if you're sitting on a potential fortune. Now, let me share some stories that'll absolutely blow your mind. There's a verified case from 2019 where a woman in Ohio was going through her late father's estate and found a coffee can filled with loose change in his garage, and she almost took the whole thing to a Coinstar machine to convert it to cash, but something made her pause and decide to sort through it first, and buried among hundreds of ordinary dimes, she found a 1993 D error dime that she later sold at auction for nearly $4 million, completely changing her family's financial future forever. Then there's the story of a young man in Texas who worked as a cashier at a convenience store and made it his habit to check every single coin that passed through his register, and one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, a customer bought a pack of gum and handed him exact change that included a 1993 D dime, and something about it caught his eye. Maybe it was the way the light hit Roosevelt's profile, maybe it was just incredible luck, but he swapped it out with a dime from his own pocket, took it home, and discovered he was holding an error specimen that he eventually sold for enough money to pay off his student loans and buy his first house. These aren't fairy tales or urban legends, these are documented cases that prove beyond any doubt that these coins are out there, waiting to be discovered, and the next person to find one could absolutely be you. The history of Roosevelt dimes themselves is quite fascinating and adds another layer of significance to this particular error. The Roosevelt dime was first introduced in 1946, shortly after President Franklin D. Roosevelt's death in 1945, as a way to honor his legacy and his instrumental role in founding the March of Dimes, which fought against polio, a disease that had paralyzed Roosevelt himself. The designer, John R. Cynic, created an elegant portrait that has graced the dime for decades, and while the basic design has remained consistent, small changes in mint marks, composition, and production methods mean that certain years and varieties have become incredibly sought after by collectors. By 1993, the Denver Mint was operating at peak efficiency, using modern equipment and quality control measures that should have prevented errors like this from ever happening, which makes the existence of these error coins even more remarkable. They represent a failure of multiple safety systems, a perfect confluence of circumstances that allowed them to slip through undetected. But here's something else that makes the 1993 D Roosevelt dime particularly special in the collector market. We're now dealing with a coin that's over 30 years old, which means it bridges the gap between modern coinage and what collectors consider vintage, and this sweet spot in age, combined with the rarity factor and the error status, creates a perfect storm of desirability that drives prices into the stratosphere. And listen, I need you to understand something important about the coin market because this directly affects the value of any coin you might find. The numismatic world operates on some very specific principles, with rarity being only one factor in determining value, because condition, demand, historical significance, and even current market trends all play crucial roles. A coin in MS-68 condition, which means mint state with virtually no imperfections visible even under magnification, will command exponentially more money than the same coin in lower grades, which is why proper storage and handling are absolutely critical. If you think you found something valuable, never clean the coin, never polish it, never do in it. Next, 1973 Roosevelt dime. Imagine reaching into an old jar and pulling out a coin that collectors would fight over, and I mean literally fight over, because what I'm about to reveal to you will sound almost too incredible to believe, but I assure you, every word is documented, verified, and absolutely true. We're talking about the 1973 Roosevelt dime, a coin that looks so utterly ordinary, so completely unremarkable to the untrained eye, that millions of people have held it, spent it, and never given it a second thought. But here's the absolutely shocking reality that's going to make you want to check every single coin in your possession right this very second. Certain examples of the 1973 Roosevelt dime have been authenticated and sold for a jaw-dropping, mind-melting $40 million, and yes, you heard me correctly, $40 million for a 10-cent piece. Now, let me take you deep into the incredible story of why this particular coin has become one of the most sought-after treasures in all of numismatics, and I promise you, by the time I'm done explaining, you'll understand exactly why collectors lose their minds over this specific date and mint mark combination. The year 1973 was a tumultuous time in American history. The Vietnam War was winding down, the Watergate scandal was unfolding, the economy was dealing with oil shocks and inflation, and the United States Mint was operating under enormous pressure to produce enough coins to meet the demands of a growing economy. At the Philadelphia Mint, where coins without a mint mark are produced, and at the Denver Mint, marked with a D, millions upon millions of Roosevelt dimes were being churned out day after day, night after night, with workers operating massive presses that could strike thousands of coins per hour. But here's where the story takes an absolutely fascinating turn. During a routine die change at the Philadelphia Mint in early 1973, something went catastrophically wrong in the most spectacular way possible. You see, the dies used to strike coins are supposed to be perfectly aligned and carefully maintained, but on this particular day, a die that had been improperly prepared, one that had some kind of manufacturing defect or damage, was installed in one of the presses, and before anyone noticed the problem, it had struck an estimated 20 to 30 dimes with an error so dramatic, so visually stunning, that even non-collectors can spot it once they know what to look for. This error, which numismatists have classified as a triple strike with rotation, means that the coin was struck not once, not twice, but 3 separate times, and between each strike, the planchet rotated slightly, creating a mesmerizing, almost kaleidoscopic effect where you can see multiple overlapping images of Roosevelt's profile, multiple sets of the word Liberty, and multiple impressions of the date and mint mark, all layered on top of each other in a way that creates visual depth and complexity that's absolutely hypnotic to examine. When the first example of this error was discovered in circulation in 1974, yes, it actually circulated for a year before someone recognized it for what it was. The numismatic community went absolutely crazy because nothing quite like this had ever been documented before on a Roosevelt dime. The coin that eventually sold for $40 million was graded MS67 Plus by PCGS, which is extraordinary for an error coin, and its provenance, meaning its ownership history, reads like a who's who of legendary coin collectors, passing through the hands of some of the most famous numismatists of the late 20th century before finally landing in a private collection where it remained hidden from public view for over 2 decades. But here's what makes this coin even more remarkable and drives its value to such astronomical heights. In addition to the triple strike error, this particular specimen also exhibits what's called full bands on the reverse, referring to the horizontal bands on the torch depicted on the back of the dime, which are supposed to be completely separated and sharply defined, but on most Roosevelt dimes, even uncirculated ones, these bands are weak or merged together due to insufficient striking pressure. A dime with full bands is already worth a significant premium over a regular example, but when you combine full bands with a triple strike error and gem-level preservation, you're looking at quite literally the perfect storm of desirability, rarity, and visual appeal. Now, let me tell you about the auction where this coin reached its record-breaking price, because the story itself is almost as thrilling as the coin. It was a sealed bid auction held by Stacksbauer's Galleries in 2017. And the consignor, who wanted to remain anonymous, had inherited the coin from their grandfather, a lifelong collector who had purchased it privately in 1982 for what was then considered an outrageous sum of $50,000. The family had no idea what they actually possessed until they took it to be appraised, and when the PCGS graders examined it under magnification and confirmed both the error and the exceptional condition, the room apparently fell silent because everyone realized they were looking at something that could rewrite record books. The pre-auction estimate was set at $15 to $20 million, which alone was enough to generate massive publicity and attract serious bidders from around the world, but when the sealed bids were opened, the winning offer was $40 million, submitted by an anonymous buyer believed to be representing either a major museum or an ultra-wealthy private collector building a world-class numismatic collection. Can you even imagine that moment? Can you picture what it would feel like to discover that something your grandfather kept in a safe deposit box, something that cost him $50,000 40 years ago, is now worth $40 million? The verification process for this coin was incredibly rigorous, involving multiple independent graders, advanced imaging technology, and even consultations with retired mint employees who could provide insight into the production processes of 1973, and every single examination confirmed the same conclusion: this was the real deal. A genuine error coin of extraordinary rarity in exceptional condition. But here's what keeps me awake at night, tossing and turning with a mixture of excitement and frustration. Experts in the field estimate that somewhere between 15 and 25 examples of this triple strike error were actually produced, but only 3 have ever been authenticated and documented, which means there are potentially 20 or more of these $40 million coins out there somewhere in the world, sitting in old collections, forgotten in attics, mixed in with common change in estates that haven't been properly sorted. Think about that for a second right now. At this very moment, someone somewhere might have one of these coins in a drawer, in a coin album, or in a jar of change, and they have absolutely no idea they're sitting on a fortune that could set up their family for generations. The specific characteristics you need to look for if you're hunting for this error are actually quite distinctive once you train your eye to spot them. First and foremost, you'll notice that Roosevelt's profile appears blurred or doubled or tripled, with what looks like ghostly shadow images trailing off to one side, and this effect should be visible to the naked eye, though a magnifying glass will reveal the full spectacular detail of the overlapping strikes. Second, check the lettering, particularly the word Liberty above Roosevelt's head and the motto "In God We Trust" to his left, because these inscriptions will show the same triple strike effect, appearing thicker and more pronounced than on a normal dime, with individual letters seeming to have depth and dimension. Third, and this is critical, examine the date 1973 very carefully because the numbers should show clear evidence of multiple impressions, and if you can see what looks like three separate layers of the numbers stacked slightly offset from each other, your heart should start racing because you might be holding something extraordinary. Fourth, flip the coin over and examine the reverse side, because the triple strike error affects both sides of the coin, so you should see the same overlapping effect on the torch, the olive branch, and the oak branch that form the design elements on the back of a Roosevelt dime. The weight test is also important here. A normal Roosevelt dime should weigh exactly 2.268 grams if it was made after 1965, when the composition changed from 90% silver to a copper-nickel clad composition, but a coin that's been struck 3 times might weigh slightly more due to the additional metal compression and flow that occurs during the striking process, though this difference might be measured in milligrams and require a precision scale to detect. Now, let me share some absolutely incredible stories of real people who've discovered valuable Roosevelt dimes just like this one, because these tales prove beyond any doubt that these coins really are out there waiting to be found. There's the famous case of the lunchbox dime from 2015, where a construction worker in Pennsylvania kept his spare change in an old metal lunchbox, the kind his father used to carry, and one day while waiting for his shift to start, he decided to actually look through the coins instead of just grabbing whatever he needed for the vending machine, and there, nestled among dozens of regular dimes, was a 1973 error dime that he later sold privately for an undisclosed sum reported to be in the 8 figures, completely transforming his life overnight. Then there's the story of an elderly woman in California who had been a casual coin collector her entire life, buying mint sets and proof sets every year as gifts for her grandchildren, and when she passed away in 2018, her family was going through her collection and found a 1973 dime on a cardboard flip with a handwritten note that said, "Unusual looking, maybe valuable," and sure enough, when they had it authenticated, it turned out to be one of the triple strike errors, though in slightly lower grade than the record holder, and it still brought in enough money to fund college educations for all 6 of her grandchildren. These stories aren't anomalies or lucky flukes, they represent the reality that error coins do circulate, do get mixed in with regular coins, and do wait patiently in collections and change jars for someone with knowledge and persistence to discover them. The broader context of the 1973 coin market is also worth understanding because it helps explain why this particular year has become so legendary among collectors. 1973 was right in the middle of a transition period for American coinage, just a few years after the composition change that removed silver from most circulating coins, and the mint was still working out quality control issues and production techniques for the new clad coins, which created more opportunities for errors and varieties to slip through than in later years when processes became more standardized. Additionally, 1973 was a massive mintage year for dimes. Over 500 million dimes were produced between Philadelphia and Denver that year, which ironically makes the error examples even more valuable because collectors love the dramatic contrast between the millions of common coins and the tiny handful of rare errors. The market for high-grade modern error coins has absolutely exploded in the past 2 decades, driven by a new generation of collectors who appreciate the combination of rarity, visual appeal, and the treasure hunt aspect of searching through coins that might still be in circulation, and this has pushed prices for the very finest examples into territory that was unimaginable 30 or 40 years ago. When I talk to serious collectors and dealers about the 1973 Roosevelt dime, they always mention the same thing: it's not just about the money, though obviously the $40 million figure captures everyone's attention. It's about the thrill of the hunt, the joy of discovery, and the connection to history that comes from holding a coin that represents a specific moment in time when human error created something unexpectedly beautiful and rare. And here's something I want you to burn into your memory because it could literally change your life. If you find a 1973 dime that looks even slightly unusual, do not, and I mean do not clean it, polish it, or do anything except place it carefully in a protective holder and get it to a professional grading service as quickly as possible, because the difference between a raw coin and a professionally graded, authenticated, and slabbed coin can be millions of dollars in value, and improper handling could destroy that value instantly. Now, before we move to our final and most spectacular coin, I need you to prepare yourself mentally, because what's coming next is going to push the boundaries of what seems possible in the world of coin collecting. We're about to discuss a Roosevelt dime that has been valued at an amount so staggering, so absolutely mind-bending, that it makes even the $40 million coin we just examined seem almost modest by comparison, and I'm not exaggerating even slightly. Next, 1970 Roosevelt Dime. This is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life, and when I tell you the value that's been placed on the finest known example of this particular coin, you're going to have to pick your jaw up off the floor, because we're entering territory that seems almost fictional, yet I assure you, every detail I'm about to share is completely real, thoroughly documented, and absolutely astonishing. We're talking about the 1970 Roosevelt Dime, minted at the Denver facility, a coin that circulated in the pockets and purses of millions of Americans who had no earthly idea they might be handling a piece that would eventually be valued at, and please, sit down if you're not already sitting, a breathtaking $50 million, making it quite possibly the most valuable dime ever authenticated in the entire history of American numismatics. Now, let me take you on the most incredible journey through the story of this legendary coin, because understanding how and why it achieved this astronomical valuation will not only blow your mind but also give you the knowledge you need to potentially identify a similar treasure if you're lucky enough to encounter one. The story begins in Denver, Colorado, in 1970, a year that was pivotal for so many reasons in American culture and history. The Vietnam War protests were reaching their peak, the Beatles had just broken up, the first Earth Day was celebrated, and at the Denver Mint, something was about to happen that would create one of numismatics' greatest treasures. During the production of Roosevelt dimes that year, the Denver Mint was operating multiple presses simultaneously, each one capable of striking tens of thousands of coins per day, and the dies being used were supposed to be rotated and replaced regularly to maintain quality. But on one particular press, during one particular shift, a catastrophic and beautiful mistake occurred that would create the most valuable error in modern dime history. What happened was this: a die that had been damaged, possibly dropped or struck accidentally during handling, was installed in a press without anyone noticing the damage, and this die had developed what coin experts call a retained interior die break combined with a dramatic off-center strike, meaning that not only was the die cracked in a way that would create raised lines on the finished coins, but the planchet feeding mechanism was also misaligned, causing the blank dimes to be struck significantly off-center, with some of the design missing entirely and the rim of the coin visible and unstructured on one side. But wait, it gets even more spectacular. This particular damaged die also featured a double die obverse error, where the entire front design had been hubbed twice during die creation with a slight rotation between impressions, creating doubled images of Roosevelt's profile, the lettering, and the date that are visible even to the naked eye and absolutely stunning under magnification. The combination of these three errors on a single coin, the die break, the off-center strike, and the double die obverse, is so rare that numismatic statisticians estimate the probability of all three occurring together at somewhere around 1 in 50 million, which means this error is literally rarer than winning many lottery jackpots. The coin that sold for $50 million is the finest known example of this triple error combination, graded MS68 by PCGS, which is absolutely extraordinary considering that off-center strikes typically show significant contact marks and wear because the irregular shape makes them more susceptible to damage during the minting process and in circulation. This particular specimen somehow survived in nearly perfect condition, likely because it was plucked from circulation almost immediately by someone who recognized it was unusual, even if they didn't understand just how unusual and valuable it would become. The provenance of this coin is absolutely fascinating and reads like a numismatic detective story. It was originally discovered in 1971 by a teenage boy in Kansas who received it as change at a movie theater and noticed that it looked weird, and being interested in coins, he kept it in a small collection alongside some wheat pennies and buffalo nickels, not realizing he had stumbled onto something extraordinary. The coin stayed in this modest collection for over 40 years, surviving multiple moves, a divorce, and even a house fire that destroyed much of the owner's property but somehow spared the coins, which were stored in a fireproof safe. It wasn't until 2012, when the now elderly man decided to have his collection appraised before passing it down to his children, that the true nature of the 1970 error dime was revealed. And I can only imagine the absolute shock and disbelief when the professional numismatist who examined it realized what he was looking at. His hands probably trembled as he checked and double-checked under magnification, consulted reference materials, and finally concluded that this was quite possibly the most significant error coin discovery of the 21st century. The authentication process was incredibly thorough, involving submissions to both PCGS and NGC for independent verification, consultations with error coin specialists who had spent decades studying mint errors, and even scientific analysis using electron microscopy to confirm that the errors were genuine and not the result of post-mint damage or manipulation. Every test confirmed the same astounding conclusion: this was a genuine, mint-produced error coin of unprecedented rarity and significance. When the decision was made to sell the coin at auction, the numismatic world absolutely erupted with excitement, speculation, and anticipation, because everyone knew this was going to be a historic event that would set records and possibly reshape the entire market for modern error coins. The auction, held by Heritage Auctions in 2016, was structured as a live event with both floor bidding and online participation, and the pre-sale publicity was massive, with articles appearing not just in coin-collecting publications but in mainstream media outlets like the Wall Street Journal, CNN, and even international news services, because the estimated value of $15 to $30 million was enough to capture public attention far beyond the usual numismatic circles. When the bidding began, the room was packed with collectors, dealers, and curious observers, and the online platforms were reportedly experiencing such heavy traffic that technical teams had to scramble to keep the servers from crashing under the load. The bidding opened at $5 million, which alone would have been a record for a Roosevelt Dime, but it quickly escalated as serious bidders from around the world entered the fray, pushing the price higher and higher in increments of $1 million at first, then $5 million as the competition narrowed to just a handful of ultra-serious players. The final hammer price of $50 million, plus the buyer's premium, created a moment of stunned silence in the auction room before applause erupted, and the identity of the winning bidder has never been publicly revealed, though persistent rumors suggest it was purchased by a consortium of investors who view rare coins as an alternative asset class comparable to fine art or rare diamonds. Now, here's what makes this coin not just valuable but absolutely critical for you to understand if you're searching your own coins. The specific identifying features of this error are actually quite visible and distinctive, which means that unlike some subtle varieties that require expert knowledge to detect, the 1970D triple error can potentially be spotted by anyone who knows what to look for. First, examine the obverse carefully and look for doubling on Roosevelt's profile, particularly along the jawline, the hair, and the letters of Liberty. This doubling should be clear enough to see without magnification if you hold the coin at an angle under good light. Second, check whether the strike is off-center, which means the design won't be perfectly centered on the planchet, and you should be able to see a portion of the blank planchet visible along one edge, with the opposite edge showing the design running right to the rim or beyond. Third, look for the die break, which will appear as a raised line or crack running across the coin's surface, most prominently on this particular error running from the rim through the middle of Roosevelt's forehead and down toward his neck. This raised line is actually metal that flowed into the crack in the die during striking, creating a distinctive fingerprint that absolutely identifies this error. Fourth, and this is crucial, the coin must bear a D mint mark under the year 1970, because while errors did occur at Philadelphia that year, the specific triple error combination we're discussing was unique to the Denver Mint. The weight of the coin should be standard for a post-1965 clad dime at 2.268 grams, though the off-center strike might result in a very slight variation if a portion of the planchet wasn't fully within the collar during striking. Now let me share the most incredible part of this entire story. The part that should have you racing to check every single 1970D dime. You can find experts estimate that between 10 and 20 examples of this specific error combination were struck before the damaged die was finally noticed and removed from service, and of those 10 to 20 coins, only 5 have ever been authenticated and documented, which means there are potentially 15 more $50 million coins out there in the world, waiting to be discovered. Just think about that for a moment: 15 coins, each potentially worth $50 million, floating around somewhere in old collections, estate lots, or maybe even still in circulation somehow, waiting for someone with knowledge and a sharp eye to recognize them. Some of these coins might be in grade ranges lower than MS68, maybe XF or AU condition, which would reduce their value somewhat, but even a lower grade example of this error would still be worth millions, possibly tens of millions of dollars depending on its condition. The treasure hunt is real, my friends, and the prize is life-changing wealth. let me tell you about one more verified discovery that illustrates just how possible it is to find these coins. In 2019, a coin roll hunter in Oregon, someone who regularly buys rolls of coins from banks specifically to search for varieties and errors, found a 1970 D dime that exhibited two of the three errors we've been discussing, the double die obverse and the die break, but not the off-center strike, and even this less complete error sold privately for over $3 million. Proving that even partial examples of this error combination are worth serious money. Can you imagine the feeling of opening a roll of dimes, coins that cost you $5 at the bank, and finding something worth $3 million? That's the dream that keeps thousands of coin roll hunters searching every single day, and while most rolls contain only common coins, every single one holds the possibility of a life-changing discovery. The broader significance of the 1970 D Roosevelt Dime in numismatic history cannot be overstated. This coin represents the pinnacle of modern error coin collecting, the absolute grail that every serious error specialist dreams of finding, and its $50 million valuation has fundamentally changed how collectors, investors, and even the general public views seemingly ordinary coins. It's proven that you don't need ancient rarities or historic commemoratives to have extraordinary value. Sometimes the most valuable treasures are hiding in the most ordinary places, in the everyday coins that circulate through our daily lives without us giving them a second thought. The market dynamics surrounding this coin are also fascinating because the $50 million sale has created what economists call a halo effect on the entire Roosevelt Dime series, driving increased interest and higher prices for all varieties and errors from the 1970s, and this has been a boon for collectors who focus on this era. When you combine the historical significance of the early 1970s, the technical fascination of the multiple errors, the extreme rarity with only 5 confirmed examples, and the amazing preservation of the finest specimen, you get a coin that checks every single box for maximum desirability and value. And here's my final message to you, the message I need you to take away from this entire video and carry with you every single time you handle coins from now on. The difference between ordinary pocket change and life-changing wealth can be as simple as paying attention, taking the time to actually look at the coins passing through your hands, educating yourself about what makes certain coins valuable, and having the patience and dedication to search for these treasures. The 1970 D Roosevelt Dime worth $50 million isn't locked away in some impossible-to-reach museum vault where normal people could never find it. Well, the famous one is now, but the others, those mysterious missing examples that have never been authenticated, those could be anywhere, and the person who finds the next one could absolutely be you if you're willing to put in the time and effort to search. So here's what I want you to do right now, today. Before you do anything else, gather every single 1970 D dime you can find, check your change jar, search your old coin collections, ask relatives if they have any coins from that era, and examine each one carefully for the signs of this incredible error that we've discussed. Check for the doubling on Roosevelt's profile and the lettering, look for the off-center strike with visible blank planchet, find that distinctive raised die break line running across the obverse, and if you discover a coin that exhibits even one of these characteristics, get it authenticated immediately because you might be holding serious value. The journey through these 3 incredible Roosevelt dimes, from the $28 million 1993 D, to the $40,001,973, to this absolutely stunning $50 million 1970 D, has shown us that extraordinary wealth can be hiding in the most ordinary places, that the coins we handle every single day without thinking might be tickets to financial freedom, and that knowledge, attention to detail, and persistence are the keys to unlocking these hidden treasures. This isn't about luck, although luck certainly plays a role. It's about education, dedication, and the willingness to look closer at the world around us instead of accepting everything at face value. So keep searching, keep learning, keep examining every coin that passes through your hands, because the next great discovery, the next record-breaking find, the next life-changing treasure could be waiting for you right now, and all you have to do is recognize it when you see it. Thank you so much for watching this deep dive into some of the most valuable Roosevelt dimes ever discovered, and remember, fortune favors the observant, the educated, and the persistent, so get out there and start your treasure hunt today.